I say, I sing, I beg everyone to join my song. Teacher, teacher, oh, God, be my lecturer, be your name. Teacher, teacher, oh, and the lecturer be the same. Make you not teach me.
I'm Bayo Akomolafe. I'm from Nigeria, and I teach in a university in Nigeria, but I'm on a break right now, a 2-year break that has provided space for me to do other kinds of work. I'm a curator for a process known as the Emergence Network, and I'm also affiliated with an International Alliance for Localization, which is a project of Local Futures. But I do a lot of talking and speaking and writing and traveling and going away from my family, regrettably. Our modern lives are framed in such a way that we are conditioned into believing that reality is a tame linearity of values heading for a direction, and our economic mattering is framed this way. So we talk about growth and we talk about progress and development. So anything that is outside this discourse is immediately seen to be nonsensical, irrational, pathological. What modernity tries to do is to level the playing field. So we live in a world that is missing all the bumps and grooves that makes it interesting. Or at least that's what modernity wants to have happen. Let's level everything out. So the invitation here is to notice that the world is not bereft of bumps and grooves and rabbit holes and cracks and queers and queerish spaces. The world is diverse and alive and strange. Something is happening today, and I think that's the most electrifying thing I can talk about, is that there's a stretching of the discourse. There's a making room for other ideas about the world to emerge and to matter and to be relevant. And this diversity of cosmologies, of worldviews, of knowledges is what we're now paying attention to. So we're finding, for instance, that instead of framing some of the most critical crises that has beleaguered our lives, for instance, poverty, income inequality, climate change, instead of framing it in the exhausted modern ways that we've become used to, there are other ways of thinking about the issues that don't play into those dynamics. There's a habitual mode of thinking that is the DNA, so to speak, of modern schooling and institutionalized public education. And that is that knowledge can only be produced in a particular way. So we have certain rituals in modern schooling environments that treat knowledge as some kind of objectified, reified, external quality that would need experts to deliver to you. That's why schooling is so standardized. That's why we have standardized tests. That's why anywhere you go across the world, schools more or less look like the same thing anywhere you go. So there's this fundamental assumption that what needs to be known, what needs to be encountered is outside the femininity of the world. It's an Archimedean point that we must reach out to access. And that's why it looks the same. There's a universality in the whole framing of schooling. This kind of knowledging, if I could use it that way, the word that way, is instrumental to a larger economic apparatus. That is, the kind of knowledge that is produced in schools is good for, largely good for, access to labor, access to job markets. What is excluded, what is treated as not knowledge or not worth our time or attention, are other ways of being in the world and other ways of being human. The hidden assumption behind that is that education is this institutionalized process that ends with a certificate or a degree. Whereas there are diverse ways of knowing and being alive and engaging and encountering the world that have nothing to do with certificates or have nothing to do with disciplinary boundaries. Learning happens every day. Every part of the world is agentic, is alive, and can teach us. There's a diversity, there's a plurality of ways of knowing that is excluded. How can we pay attention to these discourses? How can we make them alive? How can we notice them and participate with them? That's the question that animates what I do and what I write about. That there is much more happening in the wilds beyond our fences than our fences allow us to think. We don't know. We don't know what wants to come next. We don't know the magic of the world. We pretend to have unraveled everything, have unpackaged everything, but we don't know what comes next. We don't know how to think about change. We don't know how to think about our lives. This might sound cheesy or quotable. Let's be reasonable and do the impossible. So there is a sense in which we're coming alive to a world that is also so much vibrant, so much more animated than, so much more enchanted than our single stories would allow us to think. And how to move into this continent, this frightening new landscape, is not a question that has a convenient, easy answer. How to even approach broach the subject of diversity, especially for us people who have probably known only one kind of posture, only one kind of presence in the world. But I think if I were to speak directly to your people, I would invite you to come alive, and I want to invite you to be fully present, to acknowledge all the things that make you you, the madness, the monstrosity that you are. And I don't mean that in a negative sense. I mean it in the sense of saying that you are much more promiscuous, larger, grander, much more eminent than the tiny, small egoic spaces that we've created for you. We are being invited to dance with possibility, to slow down, even when it feels like we should rush up. We're being invited to connect with wisdoms that might seem paradoxical and nonsensical, but that's where the creative dimension lies, and that's where it's waiting for us. Where we stumble, where we feel the most shame, is where our treasures lie. And that's why it is important, it is immeasurably vital that you ask new questions today, that you shape new paths by deviating from the forms that have been told for you to walk in. And how that comes is finding the courage to ask troubling questions. It's finding the courage to move towards trouble, to touch yourselves in new ways. Finding the courage to get lost, to stray from the given paths. Because I think until we get lost, we will never find a way home.
Teacher, teacher, oh, God, be my lecturer, be your name. Teacher, teacher, oh, and the lecturer be the same. Make you not teach me, I don't know. That's what the chief finish, yes, if I didn't done that.